Successfully deploying applications on SAP Business Technology Platform, BTP in short, is just the beginning. True value emerges from efficiently operating, maintaining, and scaling them. In this series, we'll explore how to best achieve this efficiency. Identity and access management is one of the crucial components for any IT architecture. And by the end of this session, you will know where you should start and how you can benefit from these services. A very warm welcome and thank you for joining episode 11 of our series Mastering Day 2 Operations in SAP BTP, Best Practices to Enable Identity and Access Management. I have the pleasure of having here with me Marco Sommer and Sonja Petrescu. Sonja is Product Manager for the SAP Cloud Identity Services and Subject Matter Expert for Identity Lifecycle Management and Identity Provisioning Service. Marco is Product Manager for the SAP Cloud Identity Services with a background as developer in SAP Industry Solutions for healthcare and insurance. Since 2011, he is part of the BTP security team. Marco's focus topic is single sign-on for SAP Cloud Solutions. And now, without further ado, over to you, Marco.
Thanks, Tanya, for the introduction. Let me share the presentation which we wanted to give insight to. Should be able to see the screen.
Yes, we can see the screen.
Okay, best practices to enable identity access management. It's Sonja and myself, today's speaker for the topic of IAM. We wanted to give it a start with highlighting the SAP strategy, from the SAP strategy deriving the topic and impact for identity access management, then providing an overview about the service that centrally covers the topic of identity access management and integrating identity lifecycle management and single sign-on into an existing customer's landscape. Before we come to an overview about best practices, how to enable identity access management for SAP Cloud Solutions. And we're going to conclude with two small demos on the topic. When we look at it from a high-level perspective, SAP's strategy is overall to help the world run better and improve people's lives. And if you look a little bit deeper into the topics and the areas that SAP covers, it's basically SAP applications, ERP applications, including supply chain management, HR, up to customer experience. And the focus of SAP strategy for this year is to enable the data in those business applications with Business Data Cloud and to make them available for business AI use cases and scenarios that are adopted across the portfolio. So we are covering the data that is gathered into the business applications and very commonly used at many SAP customers worldwide to make that available for efficient usage for analytics as well as business AI. And that means we have to have a close look at end-to-end scenarios that are being covered by the applications, record to report, procure to pay, design to operate, hire to retire. And all those processes should be commonly accessible. So identity access management plays a key role in that area in order to make those scenarios accessible for our customers, users. And SAP defined a certain set of so-called suite qualities, which should be common across the whole portfolio. And one of the key suite qualities is consistent security and identity management. And the SAP Cloud Identity Services help to ensure this consistent security and identity management, providing a central store for SAP Cloud applications. And the AI-based scenarios based on Joule have a precondition to rely on the central user store that we have. Also, the authorizations are derived because they are cross-application derived, so that requires a central user store as well as the authorization assignment. But there's more about it. We are providing a consistent protocol support for customer identity management for integration, whether that's from single sign-on perspective, support for the SAML standard or OpenID Connect, or whether it's for user provisioning, user lifecycle management, the SCIM standard. And that gives us a consistent security set, which our customers can rely on, that all SAP Cloud solutions can be integrated in such a seamless way. The identity services also act as what we call an authentication broker. It means customers can decide which users shall be authenticated where. So that gives a seamless integration possibility also with partner scenarios. If partner identity providers are involved, local authentication in the identity services, or employee users, of course, benefit from single sign-on with the corporate identity provider. The identity services also give us at SAP a kind of a possibility to provide a feature support when there's non-standard integration scenarios needs. One of the examples that we frequently come along, if, for instance, the IDP integration shall happen in an iBase, this is sometimes not supported and not described in the open standards. So this gives us flexibility to also go beyond open standards, and whenever there's a need to also provide solutions for custom integration outside of the standards. And last but not least, we are also working on applying new technologies which require dedicated support and integration with the applications. Just to give an example, like step-up authentication, context-based authorizations is something that we're working on, and which we want to support with the identity service in a central manner, so that at the end of the day, these capabilities are available for all SAP Cloud applications. Now, when we look at identity access management, what it's all about. So identity access management starts at the end of the day with a birth certificate of a identity that's in our case here an employee, which is usually created in an HR system, from there propagated to a central user store where authorizations are being assigned, and then they are spread and to the business applications where the user needs to have a local record, including the authorization assignment, which were often centrally approved. And when that has happened, then the user is ready to access the business system. Of course, the user needs to provide a secret to attestate that, yes, I am Marco Sommer, being entitled to access a certain SAP Cloud application. And thus, the identity provider is in charge of validating that secret and then granting access, but preventing non-authorized users from access to a particular application. These are the domains that we cover with the identity services. Sonia, would you like to continue with an overview about the identity services?
Of course. So now let's look what exactly are these cloud identity services and how do they help us to support the domains that Marco has shown before. By the way, those domains in that structure are also the way we are presenting our reference architecture. So we will see towards the end of our presentation that we have some reference architectures where we are encouraging you to have a look. So we are following exactly the domains from there also in structuring our presentation and our documentation. Now, looking back to the cloud identity services, what are they exactly? So as the name also implies, there are various services under the umbrella, and now also under the UI of cloud identity services. We have the identity authentication, which is exactly as Marco was mentioning earlier, the part which takes care of authentication. Also, as you can see in this diagram, it's working like a broker between our applications in the SAP landscape and your own corporate identity provider. Now we'll speak about this more in the options in a later stage, but as of now, so that you know, you learn the services. The provisioning service is the part which takes care of the provisioning flows, so bringing your users from your corporate user store. And what we advise you to do, but we will say this in a second as well, is that the users are saved in the identity directory, and then with the provisioning services, you are provisioning them towards the SAP target applications. Now, the fourth service, which you see here and is part of our Cloud Identity Services, is the Authorization Management Service. The Authorization Management Service is there to help you assign policies for your BTP applications. And also in the future, and also already possible for your own deployed applications inside BTP. But if you do not know the service already, do not fear. This authorization management service is not here to replace everything which you know concerning authorizations in the SAP world. It's simply for policies for BTP applications. Now, we will look on the next slide and we will see what is in the agenda for us going forward. So now that you have learned a bit about why do we need the cloud identity services, what they are, going further, we will look in the best practices for IAM. We'll go through preparation, then on delivery, persistence, why do we keep recommending you to do so, the lifecycle, and the single sign-on aspects. At the end, you'll have some demos as well. So let's look on the next slide. The preparation, the checklist, where you start going. So first starts first. You have to do your own landscape planning and your tenant planning. Now, although we've seen customers which are differentiating inside their own organization between teams and they follow the same team structure also for the landscape, meaning, okay, that is the HR team, they will have their own cloud identity services. This is not the setup which we recommend. That's for many reasons. But what we do recommend for you is to try to limit your landscape to ideally to cloud identity services, so one prod, one test, or maximum number of recommended cloud identity services is the number of SuccessFactors tenants which you have. Meaning, if you do not have SuccessFactors, then you should it should be enough that you have only two-tier structure, prod and test, the ones which are also the default. If you have SuccessFactors, and let's say you have two more other tiers from SuccessFactors, then you will have a total of 4 tiers, which is what you need to proceed with your business scenarios. It's important to know that these default tenants which we ship to you, you know their default and we know their default, and because those are the ones which are supposed to be default, then we are also shipping to you default configuration for your future scenarios. In our documentation, you will find this under the name of bundles. But important to know at this stage is that based on what are your default tenants, also that default predefined configuration will be shipped into those tenants. Hence, it's important to try to maintain this balance. Of course, you can request additional tenants. So let's say for whatever testing reasons you want to have additional tenants, then you can request them. However, you have to be aware that the lifetime depends on the BTP or the SuccessFactors tenants with which they come. Also, if you want to pay attention to the tenant domain, so there are various options to do it. I don't know, Marco, if you want to add something to the tenant domain topic. Otherwise,
yeah, sure. Tenant domain is something especially important for the question of single sign-on. You know that due to security configurations in the browsers with often corporate security requires blocking of third-party cookies, and the session cookie of a single sign-on session is of course bound to a particular domain. It is important to establish and agree ideally on one common domain. The identity services are delivered with a standard domain on demand.com. We are also delivering the service with a particular and all three. The second domain is also supported what we call a common super domain at sapcloud.sap. But however, it's not yet supported with all SAP Cloud solutions. And it's also possible to configure a custom domain for an identity services tenant, which gives the full flexibility to our customers to apply the domain across the business applications that they are using, and also have a consistent single sign-on and single logout setting across the whole portfolio that the business users are using. That's why it's important to think right from the beginning, what is the target, what we want to achieve, how do we want to structure the landscape, as well as how do we want to structure single sign-on at the end of the day.
Also, on the topic of landscape and tenant planning, also be aware of latency and geographical distribution of your landscape. So try to also follow this in mind when you're planning where cloud identity services are deployed, so that they are in the same region with most of your business applications, and ideally also in the part where the users would be. Now, following on best practices for user identifiers. So we have set up everything with the landscape. We know what we're doing. By the way, for the options, how to schedule this between prod and test, Marco will add some more words in a couple of slides from now on, and you will see exactly what are the possible or the recommended flavors for splitting between, okay, I have one prod, what other business application tiers will be connected to it, and the same for test, because there are different flavors, and we want to show you what is our take on how are the best ways of mixing this. But okay, this is as of now for the landscape and tenant planning topic. Now let's look a bit on user identifiers, and let's go slowly to the area of user lifecycle. It's important to have users identified correctly across all your applications. And we have seen in quite a lot of cases that this is not always the case from the beginning. So quite often we have seen projects turning into identity access management projects, although they have started as being just the adoption of another business application, because there are scenarios which really request that your user is identified as being your user in all the systems. So if you have a different identifier in each system, and there is no one common attribute based on which to identify your user, then different cross-application scenarios are not possible. And here I would take an example, for example, rule scenarios, task center scenarios, and even some governance processes wouldn't work. Hence, our solution for such scattered application landscape and such scattered structures is to recommend the usage of an adoption of the global user ID. The global user ID is a correlation attribute based on which a user will be identified as being the same entity across different systems, regardless of the fact that it might have a different local identifier. Now, how do we get to establishing this global user ID? So first of all, from SAP's perspective, we have created these attributes in all your target applications. However, that attribute is only filled in if you are maintaining your users in the cloud identity services. So this is also one of the important aspects that we will keep coming to throughout this presentation. Now, a cool thing is that we are not obliging administrators to only use values which are created by the cloud identity services. So if you have such a value already in your system, let's say you use the object ID from your Microsoft environment, and this is also a value which you can bring, write it in the cloud identity services, and this will be distributed. Now, on the next step, on the next slide, this will make also a bit more sense from a graphical perspective. So here we have the reference architecture for user lifecycle. And based on what I was saying earlier, if you look on this diagram, the users are coming from somewhere. They're coming from your identity management solution, which is connected to an HR source. So that HR source in this diagram, since we're from SAP, that HR source is, let's say, SuccessFactors. However, if you're in a landscape where you have a different HR solution, then this architecture will work the same for you. The point is, your identity management solution is connected to your HR source, and you are pushing the users inside the cloud identity services. Now, the place where they are stored precisely is the directory service, and we have APIs for it. So this is exactly how your identity management is supposed to write the users there in the first place. Now, coming back to the point which I said earlier with the global user ID, which is your unique identifier in your system, let's assume in your identity management solution, you already have an attribute which stores such a value. which identifies you as being you across all the systems. Then, in the moment when you're pushing the users to Cloud Identity Services, that value will come with the rest of the attributes, and this is what we will use. If you don't have such a value, where you are sure that it doesn't depend on your name or some other values which might change throughout the time, then you are, of course, welcome to use the ID which we're generating. Okay, and now how does this go further? So now that we have all the users in the database inside the Cloud Identity Service in the data store, we will send them towards all the SAP solutions with the identity provisioning service. This is very important, and this is also for you a way of simplifying your activities and on saving time on your side in building end-to-end connectors. So this reference architecture is on the Discovery Center and also in some other GitHub pages, which we will send at the end of the presentation. We will send the links to you. And this is the reference architecture for user lifecycle. However, the same would apply also for authentication flow. So they would go, this case, through identity authentication service toward your cloud identity, toward your third-party IDP. Now, I think we can go to the next slide. Okay, so now that you have already decided on your landscape, so you have your cloud identity services, you have already your flows, you know that that is your HR source. There are some other aspects in how to fine-tune this whole setup. And here we have them split by, again, by domains, as Marco was presenting them in the beginning. We will focus on this presentation on lifecycle and single sign-on. The topic of authorization is a topic in itself, which is worth a separate session. Hence, in this presentation, we'll mostly focus on this too. So for lifecycle, it's important to have a clear separation of system of origin. So you have seen in my diagram success factors and only one. This might be quite a simplified reality for most of you in your companies. That's because, especially for large companies, you have more sources of users, depending on those users are. It might be that for contractors, you have a different starting point than for your own employees. Most likely that will be the case. The same for externals. It's important to have one system of origin per user type, meaning the employees are only coming from one source, the contractors or external only from another, because otherwise you will lose track of those flows, and this will be difficult on the long term to maintain. So try to avoid multiple systems of origin per user also. So again, this goes together with the first point. Try to have per user type only one system of origin, and as much as possible, yeah, this should also be per user. Of course, there are situations where a user can have different employment relationships in your landscape, but this is a different situation. Try to also think from it holistically, including the governance part. So even if we here don't have time to go in depth into those aspects, but try to also plan this together with the governance aspects, because in most of the cases, these two flows go hand in hand. So in the moment when you are assigning to a user in Cloud Identity Services on authorization for the target system, then that user will also be provisioned in the target system. Hence, try to think about it holistically. Where are the users coming from? Where is the access request starting from? Are we sending this to a SOD check engine or not? Who is supposed to do the provisioning, the SOD solution or my own IAM flow? So think about it also in the context of access governance. Last but not the least, the provisioning service is the central tool to provision users in SAP solutions. So that is not just our recommendation, but it's really the way we are developing functionality going further. So we try to also, not we try, we do build a lot of new connectors for SAP solutions, and we are also working on delivering to you default settings, also called bundles in our documentation, for you to provision in the target solution. And now we will look together with Marco to the single sign-on best practices.
Sure. Let's have a look at single sign-on integration. One of the topics that often comes up at the very beginning is the SSO protocol to be used, where we have the security assertion markup language as well as OpenID Connect. And in principle, both SSO protocols are totally fine from integration. They are also in SAP solutions. Both are supported. It's just the trend, I would call it like this, is towards OpenID Connect, not because of the initial browser-based single sign-on. Both are fine. However, when we look at subsequent system-to-system communication, whether it's app-to-app, app-to-service communication, the OpenID, the JOT tokens of OpenID Connect can be used also to protect such system-to-system calls. And that's why I would call it the trend is rather towards OpenID Connect. From one thing to be prepared for, going forward, a lot of applications will likely be integrated with the identity services, and so a lot of application trust configurations come up. We see that for large customers and our IT internally here, this may up to hundreds, even thousands of applications, and it's possible to structure them in a parent-child setup that simplifies administration efforts, where common settings can be configured on the parent application and will be derived on the child setup. Whenever there are scenarios where single sign-on with the proprietary desktop client of SAP GUI is still needed, then there is a new cloud service, or meanwhile not that new anymore. The SAP Secure Login service is available that seamlessly integrates with the identity authentication service to seamlessly allow single sign-on also with SAP GUI going forward. Now, when we have a look at the tenant delivery, how does a customer get a tenant? It depends a little bit how the applications have designed their delivery model. Often the identity services are delivered fully pre-configured with the very first cloud solution that is delivered, that the customer licenses, for instance, S/4HANA Cloud, integrated business planning. When such a tenant is handed over to our customers, it's already pre-configured, the productive instance to the productive identity services tenant and the test to the test. And if the customer so far doesn't have an identity services tenant, then those will be generated. Other applications like the Business Technology Platform has decided to do that as a self-service for the administrator in the cockpit. There's a self-service to request an identity services tenant in case a customer doesn't have one yet. And it's the same with the SuccessFactors Upgrade Center. Sonja already mentioned that due to the specific situation that SuccessFactors Business system is usually a system of origin for a user base, there is an option in the Upgrade Center to request a dedicated identity services tenant per BSIX instance. It is possible to gain an overview about the existing tenants via what we call an IAM tenants application provides such an overview, or SAP for Me also shares such an overview to be able to see which identity services tenants are available for a customer. When we have a look at the tier recommendations, and I saw that this was also one of the questions that came up there. That question is, why do we focus and limit on a two-tier setup from IAM perspective, whereas in the on-premise world, we often have for SAP system a three-tier. We have development, test, QA, and productive. This is also something which S/4HANA Cloud, meanwhile, adopted for the public cloud system. They are also offering a three-system landscape. However, still the question is, what do we want to control? And we have seen, based on discussions with customers, that there's principle two common setups are adopted, and we will visualize that. So the recommendation and what we provide is still to reintegrate from IAM perspective just with two instances, and that was also confirmed from our business applications that this is the expected and recommended way forward, and we will have a look at it when we proceed to the overview. For persistence, Sonja, do you want to continue?
Yes, so Persistency Identity Directory is a central user store for SAP applications. This is more than a recommendation, and here I will stress again, it's the way we are also building defaults for you. So we are assuming that you will save the users in the Cloud Identity Services because of many reasons. One of them is the generation of the global user ID, or the merging at least of these attributes. And the point is that we want to make your integration with the SAP applications as easy and fast as possible, but in a secure way. So we really try to simplify the way you're adopting SAP applications. So we try to unify this with the help of the Cloud Identity Services. We are also working on, so again, based on this recommendation, we are working on not just defaults for provisioning, but also defaults in terms of how the data is maintained with the colleagues from various LOBs, meaning we are looking on what API endpoints they have, what attributes are they expecting to receive there, and we are following this up in the Cloud Identity Services, meaning we do schema extensions in the directory, and then we are updating our provisioning transformation to take over that. Moving forward, we will also make sure that the users which you are saving in our persistency layer are saved with all the minimum set of attributes so that you can run your business scenarios. And this is an immense value prop, because in this way, you don't have to always, as an administrator, look into what it is that we do with API and endpoint, how we are evolving our endpoints, and then have to adapt connectors and then create them, transport them to production, and so on and so forth. And last but not least, this is a precondition for Joule. So if what I spoke till now is just how we try to make your life easier as an administrator, it's really a precondition for Joule and applications with embedded analytics. Because again, we have to ensure the fact that your user is being identified throughout all the applications in the same way. And this can only be done in the way we have defined it for you. Yeah.
Okay, coming back to the tier recommendations, and as mentioned, we also had a question in the chat. So in principle, we have seen from integration perspective that there are two common patterns to integrate from IAM perspective, that the productive identity services tenant serves just as IDP and as the source for identity lifecycle management for the productive applications, whereas the test serves the test development and potentially sandbox environment. And the latter is, from my point of view, even more recommended and common at customer side, that the productive instance serves also development, test, and productive, because for a developer, the development system is, of course, the productive instance that he's working on, and he expects to have single sign-on with his corporate user in the productive identity provider. When the IAM test instance is rather to test specific integration scenarios from IAM perspective. So if I'm asked for a recommendation, this one is here the one that I would give to customers to consider. However, our service offers the flexibility to integrate that based on the needs, as well as the security concept which a customer has to apply. Now let's continue to have a look at the best practices with a focus on identity lifecycle management.
Yep. So okay, B2E. I also saw a question in the chat about CM, so Customer Identity and Access Management. The dedicated tool for these scenarios is CDC. Yeah, the previous name was Gigia, indeed. So those are kind of that is the tool dedicated for your CM scenarios. We are here more in the context of enterprise users. Of course, there is a way of overlapping, might be overlapping, but that is your dedicated go-to tool for such CM scenarios. That is out of scope for this presentation for rationale of time. So going further with the best practices for lifecycle, you have to use either an HCM or an IDM solution as the leading one. So again, coming back to the way we're bringing the users in the directory service, you have to have ideally one source, or as we've said earlier, remember to try to consolidate per user type the source. We recommend you to use the IPS to provision your user to the backend applications, exactly as you have seen in some slides earlier. That's because of reasons which we have already mentioned and touched upon, such as we want to take over maintaining these connectors and the relationship with your backend application. If you have old IPS tenants running on BTP, we can't stress enough on the fact that it's a good moment to go and migrate on the new infrastructure. If you are in the situation that you are having also you're using third-party connectivity and you have such a license for it, then this is something which you will be able to use as long as your license covers it also on the new infrastructure. We have a very nice migration wizard. So the documentation is there. Just have a look and migrate as soon as possible. Another recommendation for the provisioning landscape is to try, where possible, to use certificate authentication, not basic authentication. So you will see in our connectors that some of them support both. Go for the latter one. Now, for large-scale user provisioning, try to use the bulk mode whenever this is possible, because this will be way more efficient. Last but not least, for authorization management, central access governance. Yes, so you will see there that Cloud Identity Access Governance Solutions is tightly integrated with the Cloud Identity Services. So in case you have such a landscape, then your provisioning to your backend application will happen via the Cloud Identity Services. So as of now, it's the IPS proxy mode which is used, and this will also evolve throughout the time. I also saw there in the chat a question to GRC connectivity, on-prem GRC connectivity. So it is like this: the Identity Access Governance Solutions is connected via bridge mode to access governance. I guess this is what you mean by the GRC, on-prem GRC connectivity. We do not have a direct connection between Cloud Identity Services and access control on-premise. This goes via Identity Access Governance in bridge mode. Just a side note, IAG can manage also on-prem scenarios. However, that's the governance topic is separate. Okay, so this would be my top picks for this session. Now we will continue with Marco and the single sign-on part.
Okay, yeah, let's close with multi-factor authentication and single sign-on. So when we look at the scenarios where the identity service are authenticating authority, so username password is something that one can really put aside. We are supporting the FIDO standard, which allows passwordless authentication methods, so something to worth looking into. If username password is the way to authenticate the users, customers can configure custom password policies according to the corporate security concept. But one can, of course, also for business critical applications enforce multi-factor authentication, and preferred methods are web authentication FIDO, so that biometric secrets like fingerprint or face recognition are possible as a second factor, or time-based one-time password tokens, these 6-digit codes which one has to generate in an app on a mobile device. We also support SMS and RSA. However, that requires a license for a third-party product, and from security perspective, it is not needed. So the recommended ones are the free of charge methods via web authentication, FIDO, and TOTP. From troubleshooting perspective, the SAML standard, since it's browser-based, browser redirect, based on browser redirects integration, the SAML tracer offers nice integration, insights, what is going on between the application as well as the identity provider. And for investigations, in case particular users have issues in accessing a system, the troubleshooting logs of the identity service offer valuable insights into analyzing integration scenarios. When we have the common scenarios for B2E scenarios to integrate with a corporate identity provider, here again, the question that we initially had, whether to go for SAML or OpenID Connect, the recommendation that we usually give is, if possible, go for OpenID Connect. And just to mention that we are also discussing frequently integration scenarios with our partner Microsoft, and what I hear with them in the discussions with them from Entra capabilities, it is also that the focus here is clearly on OpenID Connect. When single sign-on shall be established for multiple identity providers having a corporate IDP, for instance, local authentication in the identity service, and potentially one or multiple identity providers of partner companies, for instance, the conditional authentication configuration offers such a way to make it happen so that ideally all users accessing a particular application can benefit from single sign-on. And if what I would call the interim login screen with challenging the user for the logon alias before being able to make the decision where to route the user to, it is possible to use IDP-initiated single sign-on, or for OpenID Connect, this is not supported, but here we established a way that the SP or RP related integration can be extended with an IDP parameter to determine which authenticating authority the user would like to use. One thing that is pretty obvious from my perspective, although I've see from time to time customers setting it up differently, ideally we want to support seamless single sign-on for the users. So we need to look at the users, what the authenticating authority is for those particular users. And if multiple secrets have to be validated, it is, from my perspective, recommended and obvious that it should be that corporate identity provider to be used for the employees for both first and second or even third secret if multiple are in use. Yeah, that was really a brief overview about best practices in a short period of time. There are even more best practices, but Sonia and I decided to focus on these recommendations as a first look. What we wanted to share in order to make it a little bit more insightful is to have a look at a demo so that you get some insights into what the system looks like. Let me briefly move the demo to the right screen. So this is a small demo which I recorded.
Wait a second, because I think what I see in YouTube is still your desktop and not the...
Oh, then let me
try again. Interesting enough, in Zoom, okay, now I see it. Yep.
Yeah, let me share again. I will share the screen.
I think we have a slight delay between the tools.
Can you see the screen now?
I can see it in Zoom at least. Yeah.
There is always a slight delay between Zoom and what you see on YouTube, so don't worry.
Okay, so this is a small demo visualizing the configuration capabilities for access protection to a particular application. Here we are changing the way how users have to authenticate to a particular demo application in that regards. We are giving them the choice for the second factor, which they have to provide. And we are limiting to only users assigned to a particular group MFA, multi-factor authentication. So any user which is assigned to that group, when he wants to access that particular application, he will have to provide a second factor. So username and password or any other first secret will not be sufficient. So let's have a look. Now we're accessing the demo application with a particular user, and this user immediately gets access to the application when we clear the session, and thereafter initiate again a login with another user which is assigned to that group MFA. We will see that this user is challenged to provide a second secret before getting access to the application. We see here with the choice of time-based one-time password token or FIDO secret. So here we'll get a request to scan the finger on the fingerprint reader. When that was successful, the user is authenticated and gets access to the application. That about a small demo about what we call risk-based authentication and enforcing multi-factor authentication for gaining access to a business application.
Now we will see a second demo. Thank you, Marco, for also sharing this one. So what we will see in the first demo before we let it run, because it's very short. So you remember I was explaining the strength of having the reference architecture with the users being in cloud identity services and then they being provisioned in target applications. Well, part of this magic should happen also real time, because we want to have the authorizations in real time. So what we want to have is that the users are provisioned directly in the backend application. And can you stop it a second? Just a second.
Yeah, just a second. Okay, stop.
Yeah, just a second. Yep. So what we want to have is that the users are provisioned real time in the backend application. And the demo which you see here is exactly how does the mechanism work. We have created an application which belongs to an SAC backend application in the Cloud Identity Services. And based on the application ID, Cloud Identity Services will know that this is corresponding to the SAC solution, and therefore it has to provision in real time. So the same application ID is also part of the groups. So what Marco is showing here is the way we are assigning a group to a user. And based on this application ID, Cloud Identity Services knows, okay, this group belongs to the target application. Now play. And what will happen is, play, now we play. And what will happen is we look in the provisioning log and we see that the provisioning was successful. Now we have logged into SAC. We're checking for the user, and we see that this user has indeed the specific authorization, which is the procurement one, which we have used. So this is kind of how real-time works, and this is why it works. So we've also shown to you a glimpse of what is behind it, so that you know when you're setting it up. Yep. So that's it with the demos. They're really short. Powerful.
Yeah, and basically that's what we wanted to share. We also let me briefly share perhaps the links that we have. Tanya, I think the presentation will be made available after, because we also added some links with further information where to find best practices beyond. The CIO guide is a very important asset to gaining an overview about SAP strategy and recommendations for identity access management. We have a getting started guide in the help portal. There's a discovery center mission, how to establish single sign-on. BTP provides a best practices guide. There are security recommendations, what to consider when configuring the service. And the mentioned IEM reference architecture is again part of the Discovery Center. We wanted to share especially those links here for best practices where you find further deep dive information. And that was what we wanted to share today before continuing with the questions that we already have in the chat. And maybe I immediately make a start with one. I like the one question for SIAM integration. We have a close collaboration also with our friends from Customer Data Cloud, formerly known as Gigia. And indeed, we sometimes have integration scenarios. I remember, for instance, for recruiting scenarios. Recruiting is often something you advertise positions to external members, then they become an employee when they are hired. So there we have integration scenarios. Or for learning assets, we have also seen integration scenarios. Learning assets are often not only offered to employees, but in the same way also for partner users to gain insights into learning assets. These are common scenarios. And also from identity lifecycle management, when external users become internal users, we often have a need to provision those users. So there are quite some integration scenarios with Customer Data Cloud, depending on to whom the applications are exposed to. This is something that we have seen. Another question that I've seen in my area was about passwordless authentication via YubiKey. YubiKeys are supported as a way to provide a second secret. And actually, dear Lutz, I've written a blog jointly with a colleague from YubiKey, from Yubico, some time ago. but only as a second factor. For passwordless authentication, we are relying on biometric secrets. So a YubiKey as a first factor to replace password-based authentication is not an option. Yeah. Okay. And with that, Tanya, I had a brief look across the question. I don't know whether you
think I saw two more, maybe, which we didn't touch upon. So one of them was about Microsoft Entra, and yeah, we do have reference architectures also with Microsoft Entra, and we have blogs written from both their side, so our counterparts from Microsoft, and also from our side, in how do the products work together. And actually, for Entra, it's so for with the Microsoft products, they are on one side can be seen corporate IDP, but also as an identity management now with their new offering. So we do have quite a lot of material also on this one. Again, it's available on both providers. And I think the rest we have touched upon. Could the provisioning also work for on-premises? Yes, we do have also connectors for S4 on-prem, and they're there. Yeah, we'll have some improvements to them, but yes, they are there. What else?
There is a question about troubleshooting monitoring tools for tool support users in machine-to-machine authentication problems. I think again the audit logs are suitable for that. Perhaps let's make a start with communication via IPS. There we have, of course, the logs, rather detailed, available. What went wrong in case users were not provisioned, could not be successfully provisioned. Aside from that, indeed, the audit logs would be the ones that would be recommended. And if the question is with regards to support for technical users, so far with the identity services, we are focused on supporting business users, where the technical users are meant to support technical integration with the identity services itself. When, for instance, user management APIs must be invoked. However, supporting real technical users in the future is something that we are working on. It's a part of the roadmap to have a support also for a dedicated user type for technical user communication, to have a possibility also to centrally manage them and spread them towards the business application. So this is a little bit of still of a roadmap topic, if that was the question.
I have a quick question. The question from Lutz, SAP BTP Global Account Administration does not support global user ID as identifier. Are you working on harmonizing it? I'm not sure you've answered this one.
No, I didn't, but I'm good that you spotted this one. So yeah, we do work on also harmonizing the adoption together on that side. I can't tell to you more in this moment, but yes, this is something which is actively being addressed on. So we will share soon more on this one. Yeah.
I think Ari is posting several things. I'm not quite sure as to 1, 2, 3, 4.
Which one is the best for your scenario? SAP Cloud ILM, CPI logging.
We just have a new question. Are you looking at that one? We have a SAP S/4HANA private cloud exposing an API to be consumed by external third party. Is authentication 2 supported to secure the connection using SAP IaaS?
Let's say we have S/4HANA private cloud exposing. Perhaps on the audit logging first, there were a few questions. The thing is, for the integration scenarios that we have for the business users accessing particular systems, we are supporting the BTP audit log as a central tool to write the logs into. And that is also for BTP-based applications, the recommendations that our architects give. To be honest, for CPI, I cannot give a recommendation for the technical system-to-system communication, how they are writing the logs, whether that's separate logs. I mean, we have that ourselves with the identity provisioning, where we are providing detailed logs as part of the IPS functionality. So this is then provided. However, if CPI provides dedicated logging capabilities for their integration scenarios, then this is for the system-to-system communication, then probably the preferred way. However, as mentioned, for the business logs, when business users access the business applications, the BTP audit log is the one that is usually recommended to our development teams.
Marco, perhaps you can unshare, then we are visible.
Stop share. Okay.
Perfect, thank you. So, now I would like also to offer, if you have any questions that pop up after this session, please write them in the comments area underneath this video, and we will look at them and answer them. So, can we get a recording for this session? The link you are using now will be, once the session is closed, will be for looking at the video. So you can just use this link you're now using to watch the session again. So just copy the link and then you have it. And I think that is, I would like to take the opportunity while we're waiting for new questions to pop up, to thank our experts for this excellent presentation. It was very clear, and given how many people have joined, I think it is a very, very important topic. And therefore, big thank you for your presentation. And of course, a warm thank you to all attendees for joining. I hope you got a lot of value from this session, and I hope to see you again next week.
Okay. See you. Bye-bye.
So no new questions popping up. And with this, have a great day, have a great evening, depending on where you are. Bye-bye.
Bye.